In our company, it's 50. So half of our money, half of every dollar of acquisition fees that we make goes directly into a marketing salary or a marketing expense. So we keep it at 50% because we believe that 30% has one challenge, that there are going to be deals that will fail that could destabilize you even if the other deals are succeeding. So we stay at 50%, and it allows us to have freedom, the sort of freedom that we have today. Can you imagine, Rob? We had deals that, because we have so much equity, we had tiered the deals so that investors were coming in at different months. Okay, nobody does that because there's risks with that, but obviously you increase the IRR by having investors coming in different months for these longer deals. As you can imagine, in March, a bunch of those investors fell off, and then in April they fell off again, and then May they fell off again. But because for years and years we had invested 50% of our total budget on marketing, we were just able to find other people, right? So we didn't even send one single email out to our database saying, hey, these properties are open again. There was just enough demand for people to just pick up those shares. And I think altogether $3 or $4 million was backfilled in 2.5 months of COVID. That, I think, would not have happened. People would have struggled royally with that if they had, been at 30% of budget. And to be honest, most indicators are not even at 30%. The first thing that I look for, so I have about $1.5 million invested into other sponsors, right? And some are multifamily, and some are hotels, and some are self-storage. It's kind of all across the board on lots of different asset classes. The thing that I've found over almost a decade of passive investing is that the most important single thing to look for is actually a stellar back-end accounting infrastructure. So it's the ones that have actual CFOs, it's the ones that have actual controllers and full-time accountants. They've scaled because you cannot get institutional money without that infrastructure, because the institutionals require 5 or 6 times the reporting that an individual would require. And you cannot really get a clear insight into a large-scaled portfolio without having full-time professionals that manage money. And accountants don't manage money, but controllers and CFOs do. Their job is to provide insight into what is happening in a portfolio. And so the biggest thing that I've looked for, and it's a very unusual thing. I mean, if you ask this question to 100 people, you might get one person answering this. But what I've really found is that the companies that were well run were not the flashy kind. I mean, some of the companies that were best run that made me lots of money on the passive side were companies that their monthly reports were like 2 paragraphs, right? But then they had a package attached to that. And the questions, when I was asking questions in those areas, the answers were very crisp because somebody who was a high-level financial individual was looking at it. So that is my number one criteria: work with companies that have a really strong, accounting backend. The second one is a nice to have, but I certainly looked at it, is have they scaled to the point where they have an in-house property management company? Because if you do that, you get a better result. But there's a catch. If they have 1,000 units and they have a property management company, they're wannabes. If they have 5,000 units and they have a property management company, they've scaled. I'm not saying that person that has 1,000 units with a property management company is not doing the right thing. It's just I'm not ready to give them my money yet. I want them to get up to that 5,000 units. They're going in the right direction. They're doing the right thing. But when you have 1,000 units with a property management company, it hasn't scaled. That PM, you're going to have lots and lots of challenges with in-house property management at 1,000 or 1,500 units. At 5,000 units, it makes sense, right? It makes sense to have a property management company in-house, and you can afford to hire a CEO for your property management company. You can afford to have it as a individual organization. So that's something that I look for when I'm investing into companies. And then a third thing that I look for is that over time, as the company has gotten bigger, when they're buying $50 million assets or they're buying large numbers of properties, then over time they've reduced their front-end fees. Because what that tells me is that over time they've created an infrastructure where and this is normal, right? I mean, if you've been doing it for 5 or 10 years, you should now get to the point where the front-end fees become less important, right? Are they less important for me at this point? No, I still want my front-end fees as a syndicator, but I'm moving in that direction where it becomes less and less important. So I want to see evidence that, 5 years ago, and I often ask them for an old offering memorandum so I can compare, have their fees decreased over time? Because if they haven't decreased, then something's wrong, right? So they went through all of these deals. Supposedly, they were supposed to make what, 30 or 40 million dollars on the back end, and they made all of that money, and they're still charging the exact same, stuff in deals. Why? Right? So I look for that, and some of the ones that I've invested substantial amount of money in actually backload their fees. I mean, like, for example, there's one where they charge the same acquisition fee as Rob Beardsley, but what they've done is, because they don't need the money, they charge it on exit. So that money is not front loaded on equity, right? They're still getting the dollars, but they're making it on the back end. You see what I mean? So I think those are the sort of things I look for. Some of these things that I'm mentioning are very advanced, especially this last example I gave you, very advanced. But I think that, that gives me a good feeling for what they're doing. When their reports come in, I'm looking at people that are highly consistent in their reporting. I've unfortunately been part of syndications where the reports were not consistent. If a syndication is really one of those jobs that's very menial and it's very step by step. There's 1,000 check boxes to check off every month and every quarter. I want to invest in companies that are set up to check off 1,000 check boxes. So I look for things like, do they send me a monthly report at the same time of the month? And is it a similar structure, or is it just somebody ranting, right? Do they follow a similar structure and process, and does it improve over time? And I think those are great things. We consider ourselves to be very, very strong with asset management and investor reporting. We give ourselves, there's lots of things where we give ourselves a B or a C, but we would not give ourselves a B or a C on investor reporting or asset management. And we see that other quality providers are doing some of those things that we are doing. They may not be doing it in a technologically advanced way, but whatever way they have found, whether it's manual or automated, is still very close to the best practices that we've put together. So that's what I look for.